Feminism has been the single most devastating force in the history of humanity for females, despite the fact that you wouldn't know this by listening to women. The short-term benefits of feminism may have been successful in calming the masses of women, but the movement's long-term repercussions will be harmful to them as a population and will destabilize them. Women may have the ability to make a difference and soften the impact in democracies, but the damage has already been done. It has resulted in a group of males who are no longer constrained by gender norms and who refuse to be governed by women or authority. This fraction of men has emerged as a result of this phenomenon. Women's engagement in the workforce was very beneficial to the freed and independent male. Citation needed, and the relief that each man felt at being relieved of the responsibility of providing for his family was the very worst thing that could have happened to any civilization that embraced it. Now the lady may also pitch in, and if she wanted to stay at home, it is quite unlikely that she would be able to do so due to the flood of wage slaves. She was financially dependent on her husband despite the fact that she had her own source of income. As a result, she frequently found herself confused by the contradictory messages she received from the media regarding freedom and individuality. This was the case despite the fact that she was actually reducing the strain that her husband was under. Even if the man was still putting in long hours at the office, they were probably not as grueling as they had been in the past, when the economy was much more unstable. This economic freedom is particularly beneficial to the guys who are living on their own. In today's society, women are able to both pay their own bills and cover the costs of entertaining an intellectual man. Even if a bachelor should steer clear of the distractions that women present, the modern world presents chances like never before for those who are savvy enough to take use of them. In spite of this, he should consider himself extremely fortunate to be a part of the economic liberation of the older society. As a result of the overall lack of faith and suspicion that was placed in single people, getting married and beginning a family became a prerequisite for climbing the corporate ladder in many industries and professions. The sexually liberated guy of today is free to offer himself whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and is not required to make any compromises that he does not want to make. Men who are manipulative can take advantage of women's sexual behavior after it is no longer subject to social stigmas and tactics of shame. You have the ability to do things to the women around you that men in the past had to go to the lengths of fighting a war to accomplish. Those men who have benefited the most from the sexual revolution are not the kind of people who would have been successful in a society with less bias. These guys really could have benefited from being born into an era in which having a steady job was all they needed to attract a spouse and start a family. Because their primary responsibility would have been to serve another man and send a payment home to the family, these guys would not have had much of an incentive to improve themselves or take on new tasks under this arrangement. The sexual revolution, which resulted in the elimination of societal restraints, was responsible for returning human beings to their animalistic origins. Those men who are willing to push themselves are rewarded with attractive female companionship, but those men who do not see the value in doing so are free to pursue whatever objectives they choose. Everyone is liberated from the constraints of the conventional nuclear family and the routine of living in a house with a white picket fence. The ability of man to adapt to new circumstances is one of his most remarkable virtues. As soon as he discovers a way to circumvent the limitations imposed by his culture, he will be able to exploit any opportunity that presents itself. The possibility of leading a normal, well-regulated life is no longer an option, which compels many men to chart their own course. Taking care of their white picket fences on the weekends is a pastime that many men miss, and the dull regularity that comes along with having a nuclear family. These males are incapable of following instructions from anyone because they are unable to fulfill their biological programming of providing shelter and security for others. These guys are more inclined to concentrate on one of the following three pursuits: the adaptation and improvement of their physical selves, careers that require charisma, or hedonism. Letting go of conventional knowledge in favor of a search for meaning beyond the material world, or giving up and coming to the realization that one is simply not fit out for this kind of activity in order to save oneself from failure. An existence comparable to that of the Stone Age, therefore, men profit from the deterioration of society that women are responsible for bringing about. Regardless of the circumstances, once a man becomes aware of the world around him, it is impossible for him to return to a life in which he denies the existence of the real world. They no longer have to worry about this obstacle and are free to decide for themselves what to do. The men who continue to play by the same old rules are the ones who are going to suffer the consequences of this system. These gallant men will, unfortunately, have to go through hell on their journey. They may be able to utilize the pain to their advantage and gradually emerge from their induced slumber if they are able to make it through the suffering. As the proverb goes, pain is the most effective teacher, thus if they are able to make it through the pain, they may be able to use it to their advantage. Should society once again begin to value reason and responsibility, the men who lament the state of society and its wild women have not yet discovered a cause that is more important to them than the women they covet. These gentlemen will be the trailblazers in the return to traditional courtship and marriage rituals of the future, demonstrating that they are unwilling to adjust their own behavior and would rather others adhere to their expectations than alter their own. The power of an independent man who can only rely on himself is unparalleled by the power of any natural occurrence. When his shackles are finally removed, he will have the freedom to mold his destiny in any way that he sees fit. The true character of women, which had been concealed by previous knowledge, has been brought to light as a result of feminism. Because the degradation is so widespread at this time, the falling status of women will never be forgotten because it is impossible to reverse the trend. It is impossible to filter away the pain that is caused to males while also isolating women when they sell their souls for worldly gain. Anyone with a modicum of common sense can understand that this way of life is not one that can be maintained indefinitely. In addition to that, that man needs to acknowledge the seriousness of the circumstance. There are solutions to the issues at hand, yet, due to the impracticality of such solutions, they cannot be put into action. It is reasonable to believe that no woman would go so far as to vote against the removal of limits on women's rights if doing so would be in her best interests. Participate in the discussion that is taking place. It should be obvious to everyone with a modicum of common sense that his people's culture is drawing dangerously close to its end. When people who take more than they contribute are granted the right to vote, what kind of outcomes can we expect? This prediction was made by a great number of historical individuals, yet, because every succeeding generation believes that it is wiser than the one before it, it is only rarely taken to heart. In the event that the system collapses and society is thrown into disarray, it will be the men who are responsible for picking up the pieces and beginning again. Whether or not those educated men decide to contribute to the new society that is being constructed on the ruins of the old society will determine the society's potential to survive in the long run. A wise man is aware that no matter how much control he exercises over his kingdom, once he is no longer there to preserve it, it will inevitably succumb into weakness and decadence. This is true regardless of how much control he exercises over his domain. This pessimism serves as a significant obstacle to the achievement of efficiency. Men are experiencing greater spiritual, emotional, and mental agony than at any other time in history as a direct result of the explosion of information. Convincing the guys to participate in the reconstruction of society will be the most challenging task for those who aid in the destruction of civilization and liberate the males.